So chapter 2 starts on page 23 and takes us away from West Egg and East Egg, Old and New Money, and it shows us the connection to New York City. So in order to get to New York City, you have to drive through what's called the Valley of Ashes, and it's a really depressing place. It's where the road joins up with the train tracks, and color symbolism on page 23, it's all gray. Gray heaps of ashes, gray men, gray bleak dust. So this is Fitzgerald pointing out that there is a byproduct to the 1920s and capitalism and commercialism. And, you know, Tom and Daisy are living this really rich lifestyle, but it comes at a cost. And it also could be symbolic of the moral decay. We've talked about how marriage is not really cherished or honored in this decade. It seems like it's pretty fluid. Tom openly has an affair with this woman named Myrtle. So as they arrive here at the Valley of Ashes, Tom, who's pretty tanked, it's a Sunday afternoon in July, so we're fast forwarding from June a couple of weeks, summer of 1922, and he tells Nick, let's go, I want you to meet my girl. Now, there's a billboard that oversees the Valley of Ashes, and it's Dr. T.J. Eckelberg, and it's blue eyes with yellow glasses, if we're looking at color symbolism here. Now, whoever built that billboard, is gone. You know, either he moved his practice elsewhere, the optometrist, or he died. But it still gives this weird, eerie symbolism that, oh, God is watching, the eyes of God. And by the way, that would be representative on your cover here, the eyes. So just so you know. So they go inside to a car garage, and it's George Wilson's garage. George Wilson is Myrtle's husband. And as soon as they walk in, George Wilson's a foil to Tom. Tom is really aggressive and arrogant, and George is weak and meager. On page 25, he jokes with Tom weekly about buying his car. And here's a description of Wilson. He was a blonde, spiritless, anemic man, faintly handsome, and he had a damp gleam of hope spring into his light blue eyes. So he has blue eyes like T.J. Eckelberg. But anyway, Tom, who is not only sleeping with his wife, Wilson doesn't know, but he says, you know, Wilson asks, what about that car? Are you going to sell me that car? And he says, you know, if you feel that way, maybe I'll sell it somewhere else. You know, Tom just holds it over Wilson, and Wilson says, well, I didn't mean that. So Tom is just insulting and horrible to poor Wilson. Here comes Myrtle. Myrtle is quite the opposite of Daisy. She's a thickish figure of a woman who blocks out the light as she comes down the stairs. She's in her mid-30s, faintly stout, but she carries her surplus flesh sensuously as some women can. So she's not a very classy lady, and there's no way that Tom's going to leave Daisy for her, but she provides some excitement for him. And as she comes down, she orders George. She says, go get some chairs so that people can sit down. And George scampers off, and that's when they decide they're going to meet up in a taxi and head on into the city together right in front of everybody. When Nick asks, doesn't her husband object? Tom says, Wilson, he thinks she's going to go to see her sister in New York. He's so dumb, he doesn't even know he's alive. Poor Wilson. So Myrtle, I think, is trying to pretend to be rich. She's trying to pretend to be something she's not. You know, the lack of authenticity is thematic throughout the whole novel. And so she gets Tom, after she escapes and they meet up and they're about to ride in their taxi, she gets Tom to buy her a dog. And it just shows the carelessness of this time period. You know, the upper class would just buy a dog on a whim. What's going to happen to this dog? It's going to sit in Tom's penthouse. He doesn't even live there. Who's going to take care of the dog? You know, just a careless act. And then they head on to the apartment where we meet Catherine and the McKees, who are neighbors in the building. Here is a description of Catherine. Catherine, page 30, this is Myrtle's younger sister. A solid, sticky bob of red hair, a complexion powdered milky white. Her eyebrows have been plucked and then drawn on again at a rakish angle. So we see a lot of this cheap, you know, a lack of authenticity here. Even though Tom has money, it's not like he has class or taste. You know, these oversized couches are shoved into this small apartment, and you have to squeeze to get around. And yes, they're tapestried with the Palace of Versailles, but then town tattle gossip magazines are flung over them. So you see how cheap and empty all of this is. And so Myrtle changes yet again, and she says this line on page 31 when Mrs. McKee, we'll talk about her in a second, she says, "Oh, I like your dress. I think it's adorable." And here's what Myrtle says. "Oh, it's just a crazy old thing. I slip it on when I don't care what I look like." You might remember that line from It's a Wonderful Life. But also it just shows, of course she cares. She's trying to play the role of debutante, of rich housewife, when she's just a girl on the side, you know. So Mr. and Mrs. McKee also live in the building, and Mr. McKee's a photographer, and Mrs. McKee is his wife. It seems that their marriage might be a sham. Mr. McKee is likely to be gay, and this whole scene kind of unfolds between him and Nick. So hold that as we keep going here. Turn to page 32, 33. We can see how, as the party's getting started, they're gossiping about Gatsby. So that's for our benefit. We haven't met Gatsby yet, but the story is still The Great Gatsby. So they wonder about who he is. Was he a relative of Kaiser Wilhelm, the Emperor of Germany, between 1888 and 1918? You know, all these rumors are sort of swirling about it. But on page 33, we find out that Catherine is waiting, and so is Myrtle, for Tom to leave Daisy. And that's not going to happen. She says, well, Daisy's a Catholic, and they don't believe in divorce. What's ironic is, of course, Daisy's not Catholic. It obviously is an excuse that Tom has given her because he's not going to leave his wife. But F. Scott Fitzgerald, you might recall from that video I hope you watched, he is Catholic. He was Catholic. They were married in St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City, which is phenomenal. So, my cat is back there being crazy. Anyway, moving on. Myrtle has been let down about her marriage to George. And she says, you know, I married him because I thought he was a gentleman. I'm at the bottom of 34. I thought he knew something about breeding, but he wasn't fit to lick my shoe. So Myrtle, I guess, was hoping for more when she married George, and when she found out that he borrowed his suit for their wedding, she cried. You know, I knew right away I made a mistake. And that's just so sad and shallow. It shows how superficial these characters can be and how it's all about the money. F. Scott Fitzgerald's definitely making a commentary about that, even though he lived it, you know. And so Nick this whole time is just a casual worker, and he says this is the second time, and so out of 2 times he's ever been drunk, this is the second time. So is he a reliable narrator? We'll find out, because a Gatsby party is about to happen, and there's a lot of booze there. But he's just watching, and at the bottom of 35, there's a very famous quote. He says, as he's watching this party unfold, he says, I was within and without, simultaneously enchanted and repelled by the inexhaustible variety of life. Sometimes I feel that way too. I'm within and without, both enchanted and repelled by the variety of life. That's sort of Nick's roles as narrator, as he just watches. On page 36, Myrtle goes through this really weird, kind of creepy monologue about how she and Tom first met. She knows immediately he's a gentleman. And then they sort of laugh about getting a collar for the dog. She's playing the role here. And as the night goes on, it's between the hours of 9 and 10, and Mr. McKee passes out, you know, the photographer. And there's been like a little piece of shaving cream on his face. And so Nick goes and gets it. He's like, I'll get that bad boy. Just kind of a strange thing. So if we look on page 37, things get really heated. At some point around midnight, Myrtle starts saying, Daisy, Daisy, Daisy. I'll say her name however I want to. Daisy, Daisy, Daisy. And Tom hauls off and smashes her. Tom Buchanan broke her nose with his open hand. Wow. And so bloody towels everywhere, bathroom floor. So I don't know what you think, but I mean, geez, Tom. What a guy. The end of the party brings up a lot of questions. So, of course, it's 1924, 25 when this novel is published, and homosexuality is not acceptable at this time. But there's a case that there's something with Nick. So, as the night goes on and Nick is drunk, Mr. McKee was drunk, as we know, they both stumble into the elevator. And as they're going down, ... page 38, we find out that Nick had actually gone with Mr. McKee to his room. And so on page 38, I was standing beside his bed, and he was sitting up between the sheets, clad in his underwear with a portfolio in his hands. So he's showing off his photography. Then the next thing Nick remembers, ... I was lying half asleep in the cold lower level of the Pennsylvania station. So it's a drunken ending for sure. But why would he be with Mr. McKee, and why would Mr. McKee be mostly undressed? So just kind of interesting little development of Nick's character. All right, thanks for watching.